problem number 4 of the first worksheet of section 5.2 asks us to pick values of a, b, and c so that the discriminant satisfies the given property. Then use the quadratic formula to determine how many solutions your equation has. So first, I think we should maybe talk about what the discriminant is. So by definition, the discriminant of a quadratic equation is just b squared minus 4ac, and that's just the stuff that's under the square root sign. We saw in another problem that sometimes you can have what's under the square root sign be negative so that I can't take the square root of it, and then my equation doesn't have any solutions. So the discriminant ends up telling us how many solutions our equation has. Okay, so for the first part, it wants us to pick a, b, and c so that b squared minus 4ac is bigger than 0. So one way to do this is just make b really big. Maybe if b is 5 and a is 1 and c is 1, then our equation will be x squared plus 5x plus 1. And when we plug this into the quadratic formula, we should get that x is equal to negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 minus 4 times 1 all over 2 times 1. So this will be negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 21 all over 2. And we can take the square root of 21. It's just not a very nice number. So in this case, we get 2 solutions. And the thing to take away from this problem is that if the discriminant is positive, this tells us we have 2 solutions. Okay, so the second part asks us to find a, b, and c so that b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0. So one way we can do this is maybe if we pick a to be 4, b to be 4, and c to be 1. Because this way, b squared minus 4 times a times c is going to be 16 minus 4 times 4 times 1, which is 16 minus 16, and you get 0. So when we plug this into the quadratic equation, well, maybe we should write the formula first. So if a is 4, b is 4, and c is 1, then we're looking at 4x squared plus 4x plus 1. And when we plug this into the quadratic formula, we get that x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 4 times 1 all over 2 times 4, which is negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 8, which is just negative 4 over 8, and we can simplify that to negative 1/2. So we just have one solution. And just like before, what we should take away from this is if the discriminant is 0, this implies we only have one solution. And finally, we're asked to find a, b, and c so that b squared minus 4ac is less than 0. So maybe if we just pick a, b, and c to all be equal to 1. Then our equation's going to look like x squared plus x plus 1. And when we plug that into the quadratic formula, we get that x is equal to -1 plus or minus the square root of 1 minus 4 times 1 times 1 all over 2 times 1, which is -1 plus or minus the square root of -3 over 2. And we've seen before that we can't take the square root of -3. So we don't have any solutions. And just like in the other two parts, we will conclude that if the discriminant is negative, if this means we have no solutions.